I caught myself doing it again this morning. I had 15 minutes between calls, and instead of letting the last conversation settle, I reached for my phone. I checked an email I had already read. I looked at a calendar that I already knew was booked solid. I realized I wasn't looking for information. I was looking for an escape from the quiet. If you're a high-capacity leader, a founder, a CEO who has built something real, you know exactly what that feels like. You've mastered leadership productivity. You've scaled your impact. You've managed the team. But there's a side effect to that success. People start to need you for everything. So the calendar fills up. And at first, that overscheduled life feels like a win. It feels like proof of significance. But I've been sitting with the realization lately that is a little uncomfortable. It's something they don't teach in leadership development seminars. I think I might be using my busyness to hide something. I'm talking about the tension between being the source of everything and being the steward. We think we're managing our time, but I suspect our pace has become a way to avoid the deeper questions, the ones that don't show up on a dashboard. Somewhere along the way, the pace became the proof. A full calendar starts to look like significance. I'm needed starts to feel like I matter. And that constant motion makes it nearly impossible for the important questions to get loud enough to demand an answer. This isn't an episode about time management tips. I don't want to talk about how to get more done. I want to talk about the cost of constant motion. The vessel has to be empty, not emptier, not better filled, empty. Today, we're looking at what happens when it never is. I want to be honest about what I see, even in the leaders I respect most. When I suggest we grab a whiskey, no agenda, just a conversation, the response is almost always, "Sounds great. Let me send you my booking link." And then the first open slot is 3 weeks out. Now, I'm not criticizing that. I do it too. We protect our time because we have to. But there's something in that moment worth sitting with. The calendar isn't just full of meetings. It's full of the things we're using to stay in motion. And staying in motion serves a purpose that has very little to do with our work. I've watched it happen. Something starts asking harder questions, not about business, but about the direction, about whether the version of success that we're building is the version we actually want. And instead of slowing down enough to hear it, the calendar gets fuller. Another early meeting, another responsibility that sounded like opportunity. Using AI to create a summary of a book because we don't have time to actually sit with the ideas. None of this is bad. It's efficient. But if a calendar that's full is the only evidence that we matter, then the moment there's space, something uncomfortable moves in. A restlessness, a moment that feels less like peace and more like exposure. For some of us, it's the imposter that shows up the second things get quiet. For others, it's the realization that we don't know who we are when we aren't the leader. The busyness keeps the volume up, and that's usually on purpose. In a distillery, before the still is ever lit, there's a vessel called a washback. It's a large fermentation vessel. This is where the mash, the grain, the water, and the yeast turns into the liquid that will eventually become whiskey. This stage takes days. It's not fast. And to the naked eye, nothing is happening. It's just a big vessel sitting there. But inside, the yeast is doing most of the essential invisible work of the entire process. It's developing flavor. It's building the character of the spirit. If you rush this, you don't get a faster product. You get a compromised one. But here's the part that I've been thinking about. When the fermentation is done, the washback doesn't just get refilled. It gets cleaned, thoroughly cleaned, emptied completely. Because if there's any residue clinging to the walls, bacteria, old byproducts, sediment from the last batch, it'll contaminate the next one before it even starts. And if anything goes wrong in the fermentation stage, it will follow the spirit all the way through to the bottle. The vessel being empty isn't idle time. It's a requirement. Whatever goes in next cannot become what it's meant to be if the vessel wasn't reset. So I wonder if we do the same thing. If we just keep pouring the next batch of important work over the residue of the last one. And then we wonder why everything is starting to taste bitter. So I've been reading a book by Matthew Kelly called Slowing Down to the Speed of Joy. And I'll be honest, I usually read it one chapter at a time at the end of the day when I'm already exhausted. Some nights, I don't even get to it. But Kelly makes an observation that stopped me. He points out that in the stories of Jesus, the most significant moments didn't happen during scheduled hours. They happened in the interruptions. The person who stopped him on the road, the woman in the crowd, the tax collector in the tree. These weren't meetings. They were moments that happened because there was margin for them to happen. If there had been a booking link and a 3-week wait, the story unfolds differently. And that landed on me like a mirror. What might arrive in my life, or yours, if we simply left room for it? What has been trying to get through while we were too busy optimizing our time? Maybe it's not a book for you. Maybe it's a conversation you keep meaning to have with yourself about whether this path that you're on is still the right one. The sense that something is forming in you, something that hasn't had enough quiet to become clear. But this isn't just about us. When a leader has no margin, our team starts to feel the contamination. Think about the residue in that washback. When you show up to a meeting back to back, it's hard to actually be present to the person who's sitting across from you. We tend to carry the sediment of the last 3 calls into this one. We react to the ghost of a problem from 2 hours ago. And the team? Well, they can taste it. They stop bringing the interruptions that actually matter because they can see that your vessel is full and they don't want to overflow us. So the invisible work, the fermentation of culture, of trust, it just slows down. And over time, the team starts to adjust to that pace. They learn that the pace is proof. And eventually, we look around and realize that we built a culture of people who are all hiding from the quiet, just like we are. But there also may be a deeper reason we avoid the margin. The margin is the distance between what we built and what we're built for. Most of us have become experts at maintaining what we built. The business, the reputation, the machine. It's working. It's successful by every external metric. But there's a quiet restlessness that shows up when the calendar is cleared. Success is what we set out to build, but significance is what starts asking questions once we get there. The journey from success to significance isn't a strategy. It's a surrender. and you can't surrender while you're sprinting. The margin is where that transition happens. It's where we stop being the source of the business and start being the steward of our lives. If you never leave the vessel empty, you'll never find out what you're actually meant to contain. And I think that's why we stay busy. Because if we stopped, we might realize that the thing we built isn't enough to satisfy the person we were built to be. And that's a terrifying realization. But it's also the only one that can set you free. And I think where we usually get it wrong is when we hear create margin and we immediately try to fill it with better things. A more intentional morning routine, a new framework for time blocking. That's not margin. That's just relocating the schedule. It only gets ready for the next batch of being genuinely, uncomfortably empty. If we don't fully empty it, the stuff we've been avoiding doesn't go away. It'll stay stuck to the side and concentrate. Margin isn't where you go for rest. It's a space that you allow for the important things to drop in uninvited. The clarity that we couldn't get through when the calendar was full. The discipline isn't just creating an empty vessel. It's keeping it empty when something reasonable and good asks for that space. Because the world will always give you a good reason to fill the void. And that's where the tension is between what you built and what you're built for finally gets a chance to speak. When you go to a whiskey tasting, you take notes, just so you don't forget once the glass is empty. Here are my notes from today. You are not accidentally overscheduled. Some of that fullness is serving a purpose. So get honest about what the busyness is doing for you. Margin filled with productivity is not a margin. That's just relocating the schedule. The washback gets cleaned by being empty. What you schedule around isn't neutral. That's the fermentation stage. And skipping it doesn't delay what's forming. It compromises it. And margin is a space you protect for the thing that's been forming in the background to allow it to get enough air. The real work is resisting the urge to fill it again. These tasting notes are available at craftedclarity.net. Something to sit with after the glass is empty. In whiskey making, the vessel has to be empty. Not emptier, not better filled, but empty. I think we already sense this. We feel the weight of what the pace is costing us. But I don't think the question is what you're missing. I think the question is, what is already in the vessel that you haven't let yourself hear yet? Something is in there. It's been forming. And the only thing standing between you and hearing it is the next thing you're about to schedule into the space where it was going to speak. The margin isn't where you go to rest. It's where you go to find out. Thanks for being here, for carving out time. And remember, clarity isn't found. It's crafted. Thanks for listening to Crafted Clarity. If you're a leader wrestling with the tension between success and significance, or if you're trying to align your work with a deeper calling, I'd love to connect with you. If your organization is facing questions about strategy, whether it's alignment, ROI, or building confidence in your team, this is the work we do every day at iBrand. And if you walk this journey yourself, or maybe you're right in the middle of it, I'd love to hear your story and maybe even share it here on the podcast. You can find me at craftedclarity.net.